I think the most important thing that I seem to like the most is the coding, the after-school coding, the after-school technology, the STEM programs that they have. It's really kind of introduced, and of course the technology program. The technology at the school is, man, second to none.
Unionville Montessori Private School is a co-ed school in Markham, Ontario, north of Toronto, that teaches kids from preschool through to grade 8. They offer top-flight academics, an array of enriched offerings, an emphasis on technology, and comprehensive athletic programs. Vernon Carter is the dad of 2 sons at UMS, and he shared with me how he's come to not just love, but to respect the school. For Vernon, what's mattered most is how the school has met his family where they're at, and their ability to instill in his sons not just a challenge in the classroom, but a real sense of integrity, confidence, and leadership skills.
How old are your kids and how long have they been at Unionville Montessori?
My kids are 12 and 8 in to 7th and 3rd grade respectively. My oldest, who is 12, has been there since 2012.
So that's the better part of a decade that your family has been at Unionville Montessori.
That's correct.
Do you remember well, I'm sure you remember. Tell me about what brought you to the school in the first place, all those 8 years ago. You know, was it a problem you were trying to solve, or an experience that you had out there that you were trying to change?
Well, you know, how it all started is, you know, of course, as kids, when you have your first child and once the wife has to go back to work, there's times where we have to determine where do we want to place our children while we're going back to work. Both my wife and I are professionals, and certainly there was a need for before and after school programs, but we didn't want it to be something to where the kids were just eating paste, playing games. We wanted to be more of an educational opportunity to take advantage of that time that they were there. We interviewed a number of schools and we came across UMS, and following some conversations with them, we felt that it made sense for us to give it a shot, and we haven't looked back since.
What was the checklist that you were looking to satisfy when you were looking for these schools for your son who's now 12?
So the first thing was the educational opportunities. We wanted to make sure that during those times where the kids were in the before and after school program, as well as during the time when they were going through whatever the curriculum was, we wanted to make sure that curriculum not only included some of the things that they were good at, but also helped challenge them to move onto that next level, which made the Montessori school system or school type or model more palatable for us. So we wanted to make sure that during that time, since schools have our kids for a large portion of their wake hours, we wanted to find somewhere where they were going to get the most out of it. Both some fun, some educational opportunities, as well as a lot of fun activities, enrichment programs such as the STEM programs and the art, music. You know, we were really impressed with what they offered at the time.
Now, the Montessori approach to education, was that something you were seeking out at the time, or something that you learned more about after you got to know Unionville Montessori?
Well, we had done our research, so we were actually seeking out a Montessori type program. We looked at a number of private schools, and you know, some private schools are a bit more structured from that perspective. Our son, who's now going into 7th grade, showed a lot of promise in terms of his abilities, and so we wanted to make sure that whatever school we selected would have the capabilities to allow him to progress at his own pace rather than the pace of others. And so that was kind of why we were into the Montessori programs. But I will say that the way UMS has approached it and what they've told us since we've been there, it has really kind of proven to be that type of model.
You know, Vernon, I'm wondering, was there an experience that you had personally, or maybe other people in your family had prior, that made you go, okay, this is not what we want in education, and this is what we want in education?
Yeah, so I have 2 older children, 26 and 24, and we originally had them in the Catholic school system, and of course they have before and after school programs as well. So kind of what I guess led us to looking for a better program with more enrichment type activities during those timeframes. It kind of led us to that because we didn't see that with the Catholic school system as much. we saw that while they were being monitored and watched, just fine, they weren't really getting a ton out of the times before and after school, especially when you're talking about the pre-CASA time frame. So when you're looking at pre-CASA, most of the time it's coloring, it's of course going outside, interacting with friends, but there's also an introduction to education to prepare them for what's to come in both CASA and, of course, most importantly, first grade 1.
Thinking back to those first moments, those first impressions of UMS, what were you seeing and hearing that really impressed you?
The enrichment activities, they really do have a great deal of activities such as karate, ballet, piano, guitar, STEM programs. They had a number of programs that we felt made a lot of sense. Now, at the time when the kids were younger, they talked about how they were introducing them to things like, things that would be common in the house, to be able to manage, their daily lives, to be able to deal with certain things in terms of moving little puzzle pieces around, or taking squares or blocks and stacking them, just cup stacking and things of that nature that allowed them more skills towards their dexterity. And it was more so than just, okay, everybody come in, we sit around the table, we sing, we play games, and we color. Now they did have that, of course, so the kids really enjoyed that part of it as well. But they also rounded that out with some actual enrichment type academic and enriched academic environment as well.
After that first few weeks or few months at UMS, what was your first son to go there? What was he telling you at the end of the school day?
He enjoyed it. Initially, he was well, actually, he was pretty young for pre-CAS actually, but he always came home happy. We did have him temporarily while we were still looking for something in a different program, in a different school. But when we got him to UMS, he always came home happy. He seemed as though he enjoyed it. He never was resistant or hesitant to go to school. It wasn't a battle getting him dressed and to go to meet his classmates, etc. So that was one of the things that we felt comfortable with. And of course, there were times where there were some differences of opinion with regards to how certain things and certain things were handled at times. But once we had a discussion with the teacher, we had an open dialogue. They understood, and it ended up working out. To be honest, it was basically around potty training. In order for kids to go into the school, they have to be potty trained. It was a mandatory thing. And while my son is extremely bright, that was his Achilles heel, was getting him ready for that transition into the program. And it literally was up until the day of that he finally decided, okay, I'm done with this. And during that time frame, there were a few accidents here and there, and how they addressed it was positive. I mean, we discussed what our strategies could be to try to help resolve this issue. Never once did they say, well, he's not potty trained, he's gone. We can't do this. So we really appreciated that. I mean, that was something that we really appreciated.
I'm really interested in this because this is, one of the first moments in a relationship between your family and the school that's now almost a decade long. How did the school work through this with you in a way that made you go, yes, this is the place I want to be, as opposed to, oh, this is a tough group to deal with?
Well, so initially we spoke to the teachers, and then as we started to explain to them what our expectations were, we also had a conversation with the administrator. And when we did that, they brought us all together. So we all kind of sat down and talked about kind of what the challenges are and how it's affecting the other children, as well as what our challenges are with regards to getting our son prepared to kind of get him over those final accidents. And we came to a reasonable compromise to figure out how can we best address this. And what we found was that, I guess a suggestion by Mrs. Esther, which rings the bell, was that, well, if we send him to bathrooms at a certain period of time, maybe we have set times. Every 2 hours, we're just going to take him out there. And then maybe that will help prompt him to doing more on his own. And it really worked out really well. I think that was a suggestion that really helped us. It showed compassion to us because, of course, we enjoyed our kids being there, but more importantly, we enjoyed even more the fact that they were willing to take that extra step. And then within a few weeks, he was completely potty trained. Everything was all good.
What did this experience tell you about the culture and values at the school?
That they respect the parents. I think, and there's been times throughout that time, and we'll probably get to that, where it's clear that we're a team. It's clear that if I were to go in with an issue and I go in honestly and objectively, I do believe 100% that our thoughts are heard and at least considered. Whether or not they go our way or not is irrelevant, but it always feels as though we actually have a dialogue. It's not something that's being dictated to us and it's their way or the highway. It's always been a dialogue to where they would say, well, Mr. Carter, we think that maybe this person could have handled this a little differently. So here's what our suggestions are. And there's times where I can say, hey, look, I believe this is a leadership opportunity for us to kind of educate them on how they can handle this effectively. But also, I don't want this to degrade some of the things that we're trying to do, which is leadership and initiative and the will to win kind of thing. So we don't want to squash one in lieu of the other. So it was a fine balance, and they really took it to heart, and we kind of came up with a reasonable compromise. And because my wife and I are both, we both believe in accountability. I mean, I think that's the big part. And because we're not going to allow our kids to do things that is not conducive to that type of environment, especially since we wouldn't expect the same, if it were someone else's child. I think at the end of the day, what we wanted was someone where we could have these open dialogues, have these conversations, to come to a conclusion, a reasonable conclusion for everyone, without being those demanding parents that, oh, the teachers are wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But more, okay, we agree with that. I mean, he certainly should have done this differently, so maybe we can do this and this, and we can move forward.
What does it mean to you as a parent, as a family, to have that faith that you can bring issues, you can have discussions, and it's not just about, you're a problem that they have to solve, you're instead a conversation to have. But what does that mean to you as far as deepening and strengthening your relationship with the school?
It means everything. It means everything. I mean, of course, the educational component is a significant part of what we do, but you can't do that if you don't have the team involved. Like, they talk about that, it takes a village to raise a child. And since the school has our kid for over 8 hours a day, that means they really have more of their waking hours than even we do. So the impression that they have on them could very well be as significant based on timing alone as ours. So having a team type approach helps us to kind of explain kind of where we stand on certain things, also understanding what their needs are and their mission statements are to where they can achieve some of the goals that they have set. So it means everything, because in order to do that, in order for the education to work, if the parents and the administration and the teachers have to be on the same page and being willing to compromise and willing to understand that if my kid is being disruptive in a class, then I don't need to look to, well, my kid's always right. I need to look to, okay, trying to understand as well what the teacher has to go through with 22 other kids there. And so I have to be objective enough to say, okay, well, maybe we can deal with this more sternly to prevent it from happening again so that it doesn't degrade the overall experience for the other children. And I must admit, it's been great with regards to how that's been handled. Now, we've run into some disagreements over the past, but it's never been something that we haven't been able to work out. And I think that's the most important part. So yes, that is the most important piece, is our ability to communicate, because if they're listening and we're listening, it makes for a much greater experience for both the parents, the teachers, the administration, and the kids.
Now, you've got a student going into grade 7 at UMS, as well as another younger son going into grade 3. How different are these two kids of yours as students?
Oh, they are, I would say, almost polar opposites, I would think. My grade 3 he's very set on school. He's very sociable when it comes to dealing with other kids in the class. He's definitely a lot like me. He's a very funny kid. So but he moves a lot. Like, he moves all the time. So corralling him was a little tougher than my older one. My older one he's a bit more reserved in classroom. He's more of a athletic type. He doesn't talk a lot, but he is a boy, so he will kind of push the envelope every now and again, and that's kind of the differences. So they're two completely different types of kids, to be honest.
What happens at UMS that they do to meet the needs of both these kids of yours who are so different?
I think it goes back to communication, to be honest. I think they do take each kid as an independent kid now. And the most interesting piece about that is my kids have been had the same teachers so far, right? Because my grade 3 has had my son's my grade 2 teacher. His grade 2 teacher was the same as my son's grade 2 teacher. So, and his pre-CASA and CASA teachers were the same as my son's pre-CASA and CASA teachers. So to answer your question, they've been able to take each kid individually, even though they know the other one. And they never compared the two. Oh, your brother didn't do this, or your brother did this. It was always as though they took them as their own, and they loved them as their own, and they addressed the issues as their own.
They love them as their own. Can you tell me more about the emotional side between this school-student relationship?
The kids really enjoy their teachers. We've been very fortunate in terms of the relationships that have been built. I mean, I think that every time they see their teachers, every time my oldest son goes to see his brother, right? For example, he would go to his old teacher and there would be big hugs. The teacher, oh, hey, how are you doing? It's great to see you. And it would put a big smile on his face that he's remembered and that he's cherished that way. I think that, so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's one of those things. And then in addition to that, when my oldest got into grade 2, was it grade 2 or grade 3? It was either grade 2 or grade 3. They had a reading buddy program. And so they made sure that the reading buddy program, my oldest son, his reading buddy in CASA was his brother. So the kids came home all excited because his big brother got to come read to him. So they really do take into account these special things that help not only build their academic experience, but also boost their morale and make them just like fall into it, fall in love with it even more.
Vernon, you were saying earlier how of course your family's been there for 8 years, but also you've had your kids, one of your sons has had the same teacher 3 years in a row. What does it mean to have continuity like that in the lives of your kids at this stage in their development?
It means a lot because each teacher has a different style. Now, we were fortunate to have the same one, so we kind of understood how they worked. And I don't know if we were allowed to give names, but that was a blessing for us. So what happens is having them over the 3-year period means that the same things that are taught as they start to kind of touch the blocks and grab the bowls and put their stuff away, the same level of expectations were continued over those period of time. So between pre-CASA, CASA, et cetera. So because of that, they didn't really have to think about what to expect. Now, granted, there's a lot of value in having multiple teachers with regard to a different style, but I think maybe that's more relevant from our perspective, more relevant in the older years. But during those young years when they're developing, that continuity made a lot of sense because it helped get them to that that grade 1. And then now everything can change, and no matter what teacher you have, you're going to be fine. But that continuity was really important because by the time they transitioned into grade 1, while some teachers introduced or wanted to introduce the concept of homework early, other teachers didn't feel that at the pre-CASA, CASA stage, it made sense. While taking tests in both my kids, their teacher liked to do tests, and they weren't hard. I won't say they're not hard because for them they're probably, but they weren't like a pressure type situation. But it did introduce them to the concept of spelling tests, of testing, and things of that nature. So by allowing that continuity to continue, when they got to grade 1, I think they were better equipped. And I think the same thing would hold true if the teachers had their own philosophy on things and they prepared kids for grade 1 in their way. Then the kids are going to be ready for grade 1 rather than being confused because it's 2 different messages, 2 different styles, maybe not knowing which one to grasp onto. So I think that continuity is important.
In education, we often talk about the whole child approach, that there's the student, but there's also the person who's in development. Vernon earlier mentioned things like leadership and other qualities. I'm wondering what your bigger picture goals for your son's education is and how that aligns with what you found at UMS.
So my biggest goal is leadership. I think it's important for them to understand where they stand in terms of their academic career, how to lead from the front, also in terms of how they deal with others. I think that's also important. In addition to that, it's also about being willing to do your best. No matter what it is, you have to continue to pursue excellence regardless of you know, circumstances. I think COVID was probably one of the biggest ones as of late. And I think those are my two, and my wife would agree that leadership and your intent to strive for excellence should continue. And I think those are our two key fundamental components of what we're looking for.
And how does that align with what you found at UMS? Is that also the mission, you would say, over there?
The academic experience, yes. I mean, they certainly are leading from the front when it comes to technology. The kids in the grade 6s have the iPad programs, and with that iPad, they introduce them to concepts such as internet awareness, technology, STEM programs, coding. My son's code on their vacation. They're here coding on their machines. So they do take that movement. In addition to that, what they also have done is, because it is a Montessori school and because they've taken ownership of that as well, as our kids over the few years have done well, they've been introduced to more as time went on. So I think my son was probably reading at a 6th grade level by the time he hit first grade. It's because as he got through his red books, and they moved him right over to the yellow books, and then to the green books, and then to the blue books. So he wasn't held back by that, nor did it impact the educational experience or the feeling for the other kids as well. It seemed like it was something that was just done, and it also caused other children to. I'll just use mine as an example. There was one little boy who was always a book or two ahead of my oldest, and he was just dead set on being number one and getting those books done, a bit faster than this other guy. And part of that comes back to, and then having the little tests and being able to get 100% on the test. So I think that it does, I think that they've done a great job of kind of meeting those expectations when it comes to the educational experience. From a leadership experience, I think that there's some more that they could do with regards to how to take advantage of maybe some controversies that are going on in this world, or maybe some more activities when it comes to more social, environmental things, and maybe understanding kind of where they stand, and understanding what it takes from a leadership perspective. Should be more than just sports, maybe more volunteer work, maybe more getting involved in the community, maybe more introducing to things like that could help them to fine tune that leadership aspect, and it would really kind of bring everything full circle, in my opinion.
Are there co-curriculars and extracurriculars and things that take place currently at UMS that complement this approach to education?
From an educational perspective, from an academic perspective, I should say, absolutely. I mean, between the STEM programs, the computers, the additional enrichment opportunities that they have when it comes to actual academics, 100%. There's no question. If you need it, they probably have it, and they probably offer it. So I think that's nothing to be said about that. When it comes to a leadership perspective, I think that it does maybe lack a little bit with regards to being involved more in the community. I think they could do a better job of that, but there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do in so little time, and the question is, there may also be some parents who are resistant to having their kids go down and do some volunteer work, even if it's with the school at maybe a soup kitchen or something. It could be something that's not in their wheelhouse, and that could kind of cause some concerns for some parents. So I think they have to balance it out, and I think they balance it out fairly well. I think most of the leadership will come from sports. I think that's kind of where they expect kids to step up and to do better and to try to lead from the front. Now, they do talk about things like sportsmanship and things of that nature. I just think sometimes that takes a backseat to academics, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the demographics of our school they're fairly one-sided. So I think that the academics will always, from the parent group perspective, will always be higher priority than even athletics, to be honest, or anything else for that.
With these things in mind, could you tell me more about things that in a perfect world you'd love to see improved at UMS?
I think that the leadership piece, I think there's been opportunities in time to address specific social issues. I think that would be the perfect opportunity to start leading from the front in that regard, to help build our kids to be more understanding, be more Canadian, right? Because that is the nature of who we are as Canadians, is to be able to be understanding and accepting of people for who they are. And I think there are always times, kids grow up that, there's bullying situations, there's this situation, there's that situation, there's inappropriate conversations between little girls and little boys. And I think it's an opportunity for them to address it more mainstream than just talking to them one-on-one. I think there are opportunities there that we should take advantage of a bit more. There are also opportunities such as COVID, when we start talking about health issues, issues such as the Floyd issue down in the US. I think there are issues that certainly it's certainly worthy of having the conversation. I mean, we do have a conversation about bullying, but it really kind of goes down to having the kids do posters. I don't think they really understand the significance of it, because we'll always see bullying no matter where these kids go. And I think that we could take the opportunity a little bit more to have conversations about those types of things. But again, it goes back to, because of the demographics of our school, that may not be a priority for some.
So what I'm hearing, Vernon, is that whether it's volunteer work and engaging with the outside world and contributing to the outside world in that way, or it's the important social issues that are taking place in the world and education and engagement around that, you think there's an opportunity to take it a step further, to take it a step up, and go beyond just the academic learning to that world citizen and citizen development, leadership development stuff.
Absolutely. I think that we could take that a bit further, yes. And that's not to say that we don't touch on it at all. It just means that I do believe that when we start talking about it as much, if we were to compare the academic excellence with that piece of it, I think it is significantly less to that level. So I think if we can bump that level up some, I think we would even have an even greater experience for the kids moving forward.
Would you tell me, Vernon, about yourself and your own experiences and why things like leadership and engaging with the world is important to you as a parent?
Sure. I was a military dependent. My dad, I'm fourth generation Army, U.S. Army, and my son, my oldest son, he's fifth generation. So being in the military was something that was a calling of mine. And of course, my original plan was to become an ambassador and kind of pursue more political endeavors. With family, things changed, so I kind of diverted my attention from that so I could focus more on my family. So leadership from that perspective, since I was really, really young, has been very important. I went to a military university in the States, the Citadel, and so I've always been around that environment. My dad worked in Langley for a while and in DC, and so being around that environment exposed me to what we need to do, what we need not to do, and more importantly, who we need to be as people in order to do something more and leave a better impact on this world. And so it's important that we understand these issues so that as these young kids get older, they can take the reins from those of us who have been fighting in the trenches, for as long as we have, and carrying on the legacies from our parents and grandparents.
With that in mind, maybe at UMS, but also bigger picture beyond that, what are your goals for the education of these two sons of yours who are currently at UMS? What do you want them to learn so that they're ready to not just take on the world, but build up the world?
I want them to learn. Well, they first have to learn a lot about themselves. They first have to learn to attempt to achieve greatness, no matter what the circumstances are. They're going to have to learn that academics are important. Being able to focus on those are very important, but it's not the only thing. Those are just I call them the minimum standards. I mean, meaning you have to do well in academics in order to really be available or have the opportunities exposed to you for later days. So you have to be pushing yourself academically in order to be able to take on that next role that's going to put you in a position where you can do more. But along the way, you also have to consider, how are you as a person? How are you treating the people that are around you? What kind of friend are you? What kind of teammate are you? What kind of student are you? What are you willing to do to go that extra mile to better yourself, so that you can leverage and call on that experience when you get to a point where someone else may need you. Now, and I think that those are opportunities that if someone hasn't been involved in that type of leadership, may not necessarily come to the forefront quite as easily. I think those are things that are important to me, and those are things that are important to my wife, and I think those are things that I believe we should be doing in order to get our kids to that next level. Because right now, with everything going on, forget about some of the issues for just a second, but just thinking about, 10 years ago, these types of things are still happening. The world, we're still at war. We're still dealing with green initiatives when it comes to the environment. We're still thinking about things of that nature. So the kids being able to understand that this world is bigger than just us, just me sitting at this table. It's bigger than just me. And the question is, what can I do to help do my part and leave my mark on this world, so that in the end I can lay my head to rest and say, okay, I've done everything I could during that time that I had.
I'm thinking now about how your sons, they entered UMS at such an early age. Now your 12-year-old is really in the upper grade. What's something that he's experiencing in the upper grade that you value and you appreciate that really wasn't on your radar when you were going in at that young pre-CASA stage?
So I think I do appreciate some of the things they're doing from an athletics perspective. I mean, it's being able to allow them to run cross country and play hockey and play basketball and do those kind of things makes sense. I think the most important thing that I see they like the most is the coding, the after-school coding, the after-school technology, the STEM programs that they have. It's really kind of introduced, and of course the technology program. The technology at the school is, man, second to none. And I'm a technology guy. That's what I do. And to see what they've done with that, and see how they can introduce the kids with that regard, especially knowing that we're going into an age where, heck, these kids will never know a TV that isn't flat. Like, so these are, when you get in the car, they say, well, Daddy, where's the internet? Okay, well, you do understand how the internet has to get here, right? So they don't get that, but we remember when you had to dial up. So I think that because technology is such a big thing these days, having programs like they do really get these kids ready for more. I battle my son all the time in terms of making sure that they understand etiquette and things like that. So my wife teaches, works on them all the time. Hey, when you sent this message to the teacher, regarding your homework, or you had this question, you should always start off with, hi, Mr. such and such, hi, Mrs. such and such, and then end with your name. These are types of etiquette that you start teaching early that makes them more, capable later. I think those are the biggest things that I think I see that we can call on as far as the technology program, the enrichment programs, et cetera.
Vernon, if I may, I want to do a little thought experiment with you. You've been with the school already 8 years, your family has, but let's plan for the decade ahead. And I want to put you in charge. You're the head honcho, you're the boss of this school, and you need to plan for the next decade. What's a strength that you would double down on, and something you would look to improve?
Definitely would double down on the academics. Definitely would double down on that. My oldest son is in the GATE program, which is the Gifted and Talented program, and he's been there for the last 2 years since they started that program. So certainly ensuring that program continues, that's huge. I think that also helps challenge them to that next level as well. So I would definitely double down on academics. I would definitely double down on technology, which they're doing, because I think that that's important, and being able to understand that is also very important. But there's nothing to be said about the academic levels. I mean, having to ensure that our kids understand math and sciences, art and music. Those are all key components to what we do in life. I mean, whether people like it or not is irrelevant. At the end of the day, being able to do that is very important. So I would certainly double down on that. Where I would improve, of course, is also getting more involved in things like athletics, getting more involved in things like taking them to that next level when they make it to that next level, getting more involved in the coaching aspect of that. I think will also help with the leadership portion of that. And I think also getting involved in the community will also help in that whole leadership piece that we talked about, the citizen soldier kind of person. I think that's where I would also start adding more time, and not to degrade from academics, because I consider that first and foremost, but I would definitely start getting them accustomed to that, because I think at this point, kids don't always know that there's kids in Africa starving, right? I don't think they know that. And it's good, and they should. They really should. Now, I know later grades, I believe they go to, there's some programs that go to Africa and they do things, and I think that's great. But it would be great if we could start kind of introducing them to concepts of poverty now, making sure they understand what's happening now, because that will also help to drive them into the, hey, I don't think people should be starving. I think I should already start thinking about these things, because these kids are thinking about a whole lot more these days than even I thought of when I was a kid. Right? It was all about football. So as long as I got throwing, catching football, I was good. But those days were different. People didn't talk about money a lot. You know, you didn't really hear your parents talking about money. We didn't have to do it. We were sheltered from a lot of that. Nowadays, these kids have to understand that, because in order to be successful, you know, they really have to start deciding now that I want to start doing better so that I can be more or be anything. And I always tell them the thing that I always use is prepare yourself for everything, and then you can pick anything.
Speaking of UMS and the experiences your kids have had there, what is the dominant feeling that it evokes for you?
Wow. We love UMS. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as our kids continue to get the educational experience that we're seeing today, we understand there can always be some challenges, but we plan on keeping our kids there for the long haul. We believe that it's certainly worth what we pay because of what we've seen in terms of how they've addressed all the situations. And this issue with COVID happens to be one of the biggest ones that has solidified my fandom, because how quickly they ramped up with the online programs was phenomenal. I could not have done a better job myself being an enterprise, technical guy, right? So I was really impressed with how quickly they ramped up, and not just getting the technology ready, getting everything ready for these kids. The effectiveness of how it worked was phenomenal, and the preparedness of their teachers when they jumped on the programs and they did this. There were a few, hey, well, with me playing with my background, for example, and I'm a technical guy, but every now and again you have these little hiccups, but they just went through it, and they got through it very, very well. The kids were very responsive to it, in my opinion. Now, maybe some kids weren't, but I know my two, when it was class time, they were running downstairs to get to their machines, and the teacher would open it up for the first few minutes and let them scream at each other for a minute. And so they had that interaction with their peers at that point. Then when the education portion started, it was really impressive to see the programming. The programming was still very as though they were in class. I would honestly say that the only difference between what they did over the last few months and what they had when they were at school is geography, where they were actually playing, what seats they were actually playing in. I think other than that, the teachers, you could see their faces, and some of them were smiling. And when you got to even physical education class, you got the two gym instructors, they're jumping up and they're getting excited. They're coaching the kids. They're saying, "Hey, great job, Marcus. Hey, great job, Johnny. Hey, great job, Julie. Hey, great job, Susan." I mean, it was very interactive to the point where I had to just kind of watch. Okay, this is really not bad. And I was really impressed by it. I think that was an important one. And then the other ones are things like music. The music teacher had a program where they were actually playing music together. I also enjoyed the fact that they came up with a plan where teachers in their programs, because in class you'd have breakout groups, and you'd be able to go to different tables and work with your group on certain projects. They had breakout groups using Zoom. It was amazing how quickly, it was almost like we always did it this way. It was almost as though they had already planned for this. They knew COVID was happening, maybe during the COVID, for example. So they were that prepared, or they reacted that well, that I don't believe that the kids lost anything. As a matter of fact, my son's grades actually came up even further. I mean, they're A students. My son's grades actually came up significantly since COVID started. And that's to say a lot, because now he became more engaged. He became more willing to do more, and he was doing more and interacting with the teachers. And I think that was important. And then the most important piece about that, I talked to a lot of my friends whose kids are in a number of different schools that are out there, some in the public system, some in the private system. And there were times where, and I understand, I'm trying to be understanding of that, but it's just, I've been spoiled by UMS, so this is what I know. But they were saying that the teachers would hand out the programs to the parents, and then the kids would just have to follow and do the homework, and the parents would have to help them with the homework. And of course, even though we're all home, we do all work, or a lot of us were still working. So trying to balance teaching our kids and trying our work was already a challenge. And then in addition to that, I'm not a spring chicken. And how they're teaching math these days, while math is math, and I can show them, how to come to the answer the right way, but the method that they use has progressed over time. So, for example, long division. And so when I'm drawing and showing them how to do long division, it's like, what the heck is that little thing you're drawing there? Okay, well, don't they teach you long division? My wife said, no, they don't do that. You have to do it this way. Okay, well, so going back to that point is that by them providing the instruction, the kids get the same consistent messaging. So when this happened, they were able to react very quickly to be able to provide the same educational experience that the kids had while they're in class. And then afterwards, they had time set aside where kids could log onto the during the homework time, the homework period, and they could ask the teachers questions, or they could send them a message on Zoom, or send them a message on their internal system, Edsby. So they were able to interact with their teachers even more and be able to ask those questions. And I think that made a lot of sense, and it made our jobs easier to be able to just support, me being their IT administrator while they're here at home and things of that nature. But as far as their class and coursework went, they had their classes almost, the timing had changed a little bit, but they still had their rotary classes. But all in all, I think that they did a phenomenal job of addressing it, more so than what I hear my buddies who had to basically pull their hair out trying to teach their kids how to do, bed maths or PIMDAS or whatever they call it now. So I think that's what I'm most impressed by, and that really kind of solidified my love for the school and what they're doing and how well they're doing it.